Little Rock was separated. My world was, for the most part, black. Part of my family was white, my first cousins, etc. And those people I would go to town with occasionally and do things with. But for the most part, my world was black. I went to a black high school called first Horace Mann. And then I just went to school every day. My mother was a school teacher. I lived with my grandmother. My parents were divorced. So my life consisted of school and church. You must make good grades. You must polish your saddle shoes. There were no parks. My one big desire had been to ride a merry-go-round and swim in a pool. And I couldn't do that. There was a park there called Fair Park. And we would go there sometimes. But I couldn't use the pool. And I kept wondering why, that I couldn't do that. And going on rides on Sunday with my mother. And we'd go past always Central High School because it was a castle, looked like a castle. I was wondering what was inside of it. So it was my life. It was very, very simple. A lot of reading, a lot of family kinds of things, a lot of Bible reading with my grandmother, a lot of memorizing Bible verses. Very simple, very Southern. If you were a young black person in Little Rock and you went downtown with your parents on Saturday and you wanted a sandwich and you went to Woolworths, there was a counter and you couldn't eat. At first, you couldn't eat at all at the counter. You just watched. And then secondarily, they built a railing so that you could eat on one side. I think the essence of it is it meant if you had to go to the bathroom, there were the white ladies' bathrooms and the black ladies' bathrooms. And I remember one day I was really curious as a child. And I want to know why, if I got to go potty, do I got to go down these stairs and way away? And so one day I wanted to go to the bathroom and I decided that I wanted to know what was in the white ladies' bathroom that I couldn't see. So I went in there and here were all these cops banging on the door, and everything was carrying on. My mother was screaming, don't kill her, and a big scene. And there was nothing but toilets in there. The essence of life, if you were young in Little Rock, was that the life was separate and you were always frightened. I was always, always, always frightened. If you were in the black community, it meant that you had no protection. By and large, there were no black cops, no black busmen, no black mailmen. You were on a separate reservation. And if you depended on the police department for safety, like my father was a very big man, and I can remember when I was very little, somebody was getting lynched, I think an Asian, and they would come to get the black men out of the community to prevent the lynching or to help them get out of town in the middle of the night. So my life as a child was secreted shadows, the Bible, joy with my family, limits. I always felt limits. See, you always feel like I felt frightened, like I couldn't be protected. My uncles and my father couldn't really protect me if there were a confrontation with whites. I remember an incident where I think black children were trapped in a car, and because the police had taken the parents away for some minuscule thing like a ticket or something. So life was limited, you know. It was within the boundaries allowed. There was somebody over you, somebody in control. You were in a bottle, and somebody else had the stopper. Let's take the heroism away right now and understand that Little Rock was a quiet reservation. And there was no thought on my part, no thought on any of our parts, that when we went to Central High School, it would trigger this terrible catastrophe. I wanted to go because they had more privileges. They had more equipment. They had 5 floors of opportunities. For me, I understood education before I understood anything else. By the time I was 2, my mother said, "You will go to college. Education is your key to survival." And I understood that. And there was a kind of curiosity. There was not an overwhelming desire to go to this school and integrate the school and change history. Oh no, there was none of that. There was just, be fun to go in this school I ride by every day. I want to know what's in there. I don't necessarily want to be with those people. I assumed that being with those people would be no different than being with the people that I was already with. I had no idea, none whatsoever, until the adventure started, that it would be this way. And my getting into Central High School was somewhat almost of an accident. I simply raised my hand one day when they said, "Who of you lives in the area for Central High School?" Then that was 2 years before, in 1955. And they said, "Who has good grades?" And I had excellent grades. It was an accident of fate. I was sitting in Cincinnati, Ohio, with my mother on a couch, and Walter Cronkite came on television and said in late August that Central High School was going to be integrated in Little Rock, Arkansas, that they were already beginning to have difficulty with the White Citizens Council need, the Ku Klux Klan, and that these were the children who were going. And he mispronounced my name. My maiden name is Pattillo. And he said, these are the kids that are going. And my mother said, what did you say? And that was it. My mother started making phone calls back. I was not involved in this. Then we came back to Little Rock, and I began to be involved in the preparation that the NAACP was making to go to Central High School. But before that, I had no real consciousness that I was going to go. We would meet and discuss, what might go on. We met with some members of the school board. We just had little community meetings with the Quakers, with various people, to try to set up a premise for communication. And so, I like new things. I like exciting things. I really have a perchance for excitement. I like it. If it's new, let's go for it. So I wasn't feeling anything. I was feeling like, okay, this is going to be an adventure. I'm going to meet new people and do new things. I'm going to see something I didn't see before, do something I didn't do before. So it's cool. I just was prepared, and sort of I could feel, my internal self gearing up for something that would be new. No inkling that I faced a Holocaust. No inkling that I faced a Holocaust. None whatsoever.
Get the microphone in there. Get the microphone in there.
Prior arrangements had been made that each of the children would come to Central High School as individuals with their families or whatever, some carpooled. We were to meet at a specific point. No one anticipated, although there had been radio announcements of mobs gathering, sporadic fighting or whatnot, no one anticipated that there would be a mob in front of this school.
That's right. Turn the gate down that way. Turn it now. You can see it from here. It's how the action occurring down there.
The school, you must picture, is this castle, so therefore the front of it is a block long. And within that block parameter, it was filled with layers and layers and layers of red-faced, angry people. And I came up behind this group of people on the opposite, just across the street from Central High School, to see Elizabeth Eckford walking across the street with the mob jeering at her.
Can you tell me your name, please? Are you going to go to school here at Central High? You don't care to say anything, is that right? This girl here was the first Negro, apparently of high school age, to show up at Central High School the day that the federal court ordered it integrated. She was followed in front of the school by an angry crowd, many of them shouting epithets at her.
And at first, I was standing on tippy toes trying to see what everybody in front of me was looking at. What was going on? Had there been some accident? Why were all these people here? Why, all those questions in my mind. Angry, angry people. It sounded like, when you go to a football game or a rodeo, just angry, angry crowds of people. And we walked up behind these people, my mother and I. My mother was behind me. And they were jeering at Elizabeth, who was across the street. And all of a sudden, one of them turned and said, "Now we got us a nigger." And it was at that point that my mother said, "Get to the car. Don't wait for me. Don't stop, Melba. Just go for it." And I could not drive. She said, "Get to the car." And so we were driving this Chevrolet, and the guys had their T-shirts off. and they had ropes, and they were sweating, and I just remember all these faces looking at me, and I remember thinking, because at first, when these people turn around, you want to say hi, how are you? I mean, you don't understand that what they're turning around for is to kill you. And so I backed up in astonishment, like with both my hands up. And my mother just screamed at me. She said, "I tell you, get to the car now. Listen to me. Leave me if you have to. Get to the car." And she was just screaming at me to get in this car. We both got in the car. She jammed the car into reverse, and we backed down this block. And that was my first day at Central High School. When I looked at the people and they turned around, I saw anger, more anger than I've ever seen anywhere in my life. And I felt real pain because I hadn't done anything to them. And it was an anger I didn't understand, but it was a lethal anger. And something inside me said, "You're in danger," you know. And it was painful. It was like, what did I do? Why don't they like me? What's wrong with me? Why don't I measure up? Why do they want to kill me? What have I done that somebody could want to kill me? And so I backed up in defense, but I remember almost stumbling. It's sort of like I was in a tunnel, and I wasn't really, this can't be my reality. This is a bad dream. Why are they doing this? Of course, I had always been afraid of the white people in Little Rock, and but I knew my parameters. I knew the line not to step over, and I had not stepped, in my estimation, over that line. So what was going to happen to me? I just incredible, arms reaching out, eyes looking, red-faced anger. Just, get her, kill her, hang her. We got us a nigger. We got us two niggers. And that was me they were talking about. It was my mother. But my mother, see, was sane and was on top of it because it was her shouting, her yelling that kept me conscious of what I was doing. And so I obeyed her, without thought. And that's how we saved our lives. That's how we got to the car. The first time, the first day, I was able to enter Central High School, what I felt inside was stark raving fear, terrible, wrenching, awful fear, a fear that I could not explain to you. There are no words for how I felt inside. I knew I was into a space that I had never been, and I knew no pain. I'd known no pain like that because I didn't know what I'd done wrong. You see, when you're 15 years old, if someone's going to hit you or hurt you, you want to know what you did wrong. And although I knew the difference between black and white, I didn't know the penalties one paid for being black at that time. So I was a child. And I remember walking through the grass to get to the car to go to school, thinking, I'm going to get water on my saddle shoes, because my grandmother always made me polish my shoes. And I remember looking at the ground and thinking, oh, if I could just turn back. But we went to school that day, and I went in a car with Elizabeth Eckford, with Terry, with a bunch of other kids. And we entered the side of the building. Again, the sounds like at a football game. Uh, Thousands of people out front. And we were entering the side, and I could just get a glimpse of this group. And on the car, on the car radio, I could hear that there was a mob. And I knew what a mob meant. And I knew that the sounds that came from the crowd were very angry. So we entered the side of the building very, very fast. Even as we entered, there were people running after us. There were people tripping other people. And once I got into the school, into Central High School, it was very dark. It was like a deep, dark castle. And my eyesight had to adjust to the fact that there were then people all around me, children, youngsters. Some were in class because they brought us in like later during the middle class. And we were met by school officials and very quickly dispersed our separate ways. And has been, never in my life, any stark terror or any fear that's akin to that. The first day that we went to school, the kinds of things that I endured were parents got into school, and parents were kicking, parents were hitting, parents were throwing things. You would get tripped. People would just walk up and hit you in the face, and you couldn't hit back. We've been instructed by this time that any attempts to hit back, to respond, to call a name in response would mean the end of the case. So by now, we were savvy warriors. We were beginning the journey towards becoming the warrior that would make the trip through Central High School. And so I had to shift my head into a new space. My grandmother would say to me, turn the other cheek. And understand what it meant to be the Christ. And that was what I would have in my mind. And anything that was possible to happen did happen. This now is the area. This is the first day that we go in without the troops. So the greatest feeling that I had was one of a lack of protection. There was nobody to resort to. There was no help. There was no one on my side. I was on my side, and the only way to get through it was to count on myself. The school official said to us, "You want integration? We'll give you integration. We will separate you." And so, indeed, in a school of 2,500 or so, they sent us 9 different ways. My homeroom was, I believe, as I remember, 313. So it meant that I had to go up by myself 3 flights of stairs. And the only way I could get up those stairs was to say the Lord's Prayer repeatedly. And that's how I got there. I could not look to my left or my right. If I was hit, I had not to respond. Some of the times in this first day, I was escorted by a teacher. And so I would say the Lord's Prayer and I would get to my class and I would sit down. Then you're in an enclosed classroom and you think to yourself, things are going to be better, but they're not, because the teachers, nobody was prepared to control this crowd. So now you're in a class with maybe 20 other people and you get a different kind of harassment. You get a controlled harassment. You get name calling. You get the beginnings of what we were to endure later on. This first day, we're still talking about this first day, was only the first layer of this iceberg that we were going to be able to penetrate later on. I'd only been in the school a couple of hours, and by this time, as a parent, the mob was just overrunning the school. Policemen were throwing down their badges, and the mob was getting past the wooden sawhorses because the policemen would no longer fight their own in order to protect us. And so we were all called into the principal's office, and there was great fear that we would not get out of this building. We were trapped, and I thought, okay, so I'm going to die here. It's cool. And I remember, thinking again back to what I've been told, that understand the realities of where you are and pray. And at one point, someone in this crowd of adults, were panicked. This was the other thing that I could see, is that even the adults, the school officials, were panicked, like no protection. And somebody made a suggestion. A couple of the kids, the black kids who were with me, were crying. And someone made a suggestion that if they allowed the mob to hang one kid, while they were hanging the one kid, they could then get the rest out. And a gentleman, whom I believe to be the assistant chief of police, said, which one, how are you going to choose? You're going to let them draw straws. He said, I'll get them out. And we were taken to the basement of this place. And we were put into 2 cars, grayish blue colored Fords. And the man instructed them. He said, once you start driving, do not stop. And he told us to put our heads down. And so the guy revved up the engine, and there was a whole, there was an hour that elapsed as they got the gas together and got these cars. This guy revved up his engine, and he came up out of the bowels of this building. And as he came up, I could just see hands reaching across his car. I could hear the yelling. I could see guns. And he was told not to stop. You hit somebody, you keep rolling because the kids are dead. And he did just that. He didn't hit anybody, but he certainly was forceful and aggressive in the way he exited this driveway because people tried to stop him. And he dropped me off at home. And I remember saying, thank you for the ride. She had said, thank you for my life. And I came in the front door that day, and my grandmother and my mother were beginning to say then that you will not go back. But that was when Eisenhower sent a man from the Central Intelligence Agency. The next time I went to Central High School, I was escorted by the 101 Airborne Division, members of that troop, and they were in uniform. I went in a Jeep. There was a Jeep behind me with a turret gun and one in front. Actually, we were in a station wagon. There were 2 Jeeps accompanying us. There were helicopters overhead. And I went not through the side door, but up the front stairs. And there was a feeling of pride and hope that, yes, this is the United States. Yes, there is a reason I salute the flag. And it's going to be okay. If these guys just go with us the first time, it's going to be okay. The troops did not, however, mean the end of harassment. It meant the declaration of war. The troops, the presence of the troops, certainly without them I would not have lived. And wherever they are, my God, I hope you're all happy, because I wouldn't be alive today without them. But it didn't mean that See, they could not come in the classroom with us, for example, for most of the time, unless we were having really big crises. And kids would do things like in the study hall in particular, walk by and drop a lighted piece of paper on your books. We changed books as much as 3-4 times a week. You go to your locker and there'd be ink all over everything you own. I was walking down the hall one day with my personal guard's name was Johnny Black at the time, and somebody spewed, I think it was the one at the time, somebody spewed acid in my eye. They walked to me with a water gun. They do that often. And you'd expect water, that'd be cool. This time I got acid in my eyes and everything went flying. And I had long hair and he took my braid and he slammed my head beneath a water faucet. And when I got to the doctor, they said, he has saved the quality of your sight, if not your sight. You'd be walking, you'd be on the first floor and 3 floors up, somebody drop a lighted stick of dynamite down your head. The troops were wonderful. If, there was some fear that they were dating the girls in high school. And I don't care what they were doing. They were wonderful. They were disciplined. They were attentive. They were caring. They didn't baby us, but they were there. I remember one time asking one guy, what we're going to do if they rained this dynamite on us, as they usually did. And he said, I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to run like hell. And he did. And I was a big girl. So, they cared. For the first time, I began to feel like there is this slight buffer zone between me and this hell on the other side of this wall. But they couldn't be with us everywhere. They couldn't be with us, for example, in the ladies' bathroom. They couldn't be with in gym. You'd be showering in gym, and someone would turn your shower to scalding. You'd be walking out to the volleyball court, and someone would break a bottle and trip you on the bottle. I have scars on my right knee from that. Anything that you can think of that one human being could possibly do to another, they did. And this is what was frightening to me, because there were things that had never entered my mind to do to another human being. And after a while, as a child, I started saying to myself, am I less than human? Why do they do this to me? What's wrong with me? And so you go through stages, even as a child. First, you're in pain, then you're angry, and then you try to fight back, and then you just don't care. You can't care. You hope you do die. You hope that there's an end. And then you just mellow out and you realize that survival is day to day. And you start to grasp your own spirit. You start to grasp the depths of the human spirit. And you start to understand your own abilities to cope no matter what. And that was the greatest lesson I learned. As a 15-year-old, there was a war. And you had the troops, and then you had all these kids and all these parents, all these white kids in this school. And at first, as a 15-year-old, you don't understand what's wrong with you. I was bright. I could talk faster and better than they could, and I was certain my IQ was much higher than 100% of them. And I was informed, and I was together, and I knew it. My mother was a teacher. I knew who I was. And I wondered, what's the matter with me? What's going on here? So first, it's like you're a stranger in a strange land. And you doubt yourself, first of all. You first start to doubt yourself. Then you wonder, how you got in this movie? What's God doing with you? And there's a whole lot of stuff that goes in your head, a lot of pain. The kids who were there, some days they would say, like this one girl's name is Sammy Dean Parker. See, I've never forgotten the names. The other guy that tortured me the most was named David Sontag. Sammy Dean would say, come sit with me today. We're going to salute the flag together. This is in homeroom. We're going to do so-and-so together. That'd be one day. The next day you'd come in and she'd shoot an ink gun at you, or she'd throw a rock across the room at you, or she'd call you a nigger as you walked in the door. Inside, I had to learn to trust somebody. I had to learn to get a point of sanity. My point of sanity was my religion, was God. As far as the troops were concerned, I was always scared that they wouldn't and frightened of how they would. I was frightened. But then after a while, they proved themselves in the sense that they would stand up. And they proved, my own bodyguard in particular, proved to me that when the chips were down, he would help. On the other hand, there was always that little teenage thought in my mind that there are 9 of us, 2,500 of them, maybe 1,000 troops billeted in the backyard, actually billeted there. What would happen if all those folks would decide that they didn't like me? So that thought always lurked in my mind. But I had to, after a while, establish some point of sanity. You got to trust somebody, somewhere, somehow, because you're going nuts anyway, And the way I did it, the way I handled it was to kind of joke about it. But you're going nuts. I mean, it's crazy, you know. It's why are you here and what are you doing here? At 15 years of age, you don't have the emotional equipment to understand that you're okay. And that's what you got to understand most of all is I'm okay. You know, this guy doesn't like me, but I'm okay. The 11th year of my high school was not good. I had no social life. My life consisted of going to school with the troops at first, enduring that day, coming back to one of two houses and being debriefed, dealing with the troops as well as the media, the press. It was the first time I was fully exposed to the press, journalists, press conferences, study, trying to get some semblance of order in my homework, eating with my family, trying to figure out how to keep the house secure, dealing with the phone calls that would come in from people of the Ku Klux Klan or people of the White Citizens Council, the Mothers League. They formed all sorts of anti-Black clubs, dealing with those phone calls, harassment, being warned sometimes at night of what was going to happen the next day. So it was like war. It was like what it must be like to, you know, I since had some of the Vietnamese soldiers explain to me what it meant to be in a camp of war, and it's like war. When people take out their high school annuals and they look back at high school, I get sick of the stomach because I don't look at mine. I remember once, see, because what you have to understand is we're not being accepted in the white high school. We can't go anywhere or do anything or be anybody. At the same time, we're not really accepted anymore in the black high school because we've now made trouble for the black people of the city. They're losing their jobs. My mother lost her job. They're asking us to withdraw. And also, we're on national media. So it separates us. We become separate people. By virtue of what we endure, we become separate and in some ways symbiotic because only another one of us can understand what we're doing. And in a strange way, we're going through a rite of passage that makes us separate, that makes us an adult, that makes us understand spirit, that makes us understand who we are and our limits. And you can't obliterate that, and you can't change that, and you can't separate it. So we really had no camaraderie, but very little camaraderie with our, black schoolmates. I remember once going to a dance and getting there and saying, okay, guys, we're going to go for it. This is our big social occasion. It was around Christmas time. And we got to this dance, and about maybe 20 minutes into it, we were all clustered together, huddled together. And I remember Ernie Green saying, all right, y'all, now we got to get it together. Let's spread out. Let's not talk to each other. But we were in a space where we had gone beyond where everybody else was in their heads. And what could we do? So my social life, Ernie's a party guy, Jeff's a party guy, Terry. My social life was fairly quiet. Other people made the kinds of connections that they could. You watch television, I became much more introspective. As a 15-year-old, I didn't have time to think, why me? Not a lot. There wasn't a lot of bitterness, there was just fear. Stark, raving, compelling fear. Fear that just engulfed me 24 hours a day. There wasn't time to think sort of why me. It was always in preparation. It was always hearing things on the radio. It was always reading things. It was always being told how to behave by adults. I mean, for a year of my life I was on. It was part of that time I had to be fed intravenously because I was ill. And there was a part of the time where you snap out, but there was no thought. I mean, I had gone beyond a point that I couldn't get backwards. I couldn't get backwards to a normal life. I couldn't step back to relax. I remember we got a TV and I sort of looked at TV a little bit, but I mean, I was wound out into a space that you have to be in, I believe, to be a warrior. And I can only describe it now as an adult. And that space is that life is no longer normal. You get your clothes ready, you polish your shoes, your life goes on automatic pilot. And the discipline that my mother and grandmother had given me up to that point was what sustained me. I did it all, but I did it all from a distance, looking at myself doing it. Because I thought, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe this is happening. And what's going to happen after this? And how is this all going to end? And when are they going to stop? And ouch, just ouch. Going to that school every day scared me to death. To this moment, if you play Buddy Holly's Peggy Sue, I throw up. And I have to go to bed because it scared me to death. It frightened me. There's a point beyond which you're not frightened. You're numb. But still in all, you are a different person than a person who's living an ordinary not life. Because my considerations every day were not only, have I read Newsweek and Time, and I was in Newsweek and Time, But not only am I keeping up with current events, am I going to be hanged or am I going to get it over the head? Am I going to be hit in the back of the head with something or am I going to blow up with a stick of dynamite? What's going to be left of me? My concerns began to be those concerns of I was some odd combination of adult child warrior, somebody else, somebody that nobody can define. Um, I worried about silly things like keeping my saddle shoes straight, as I said. What am I going to wear today? The things that a 15-year-old girl does worry about, how's my makeup, but also which part of the hall to walk in that's the safest, what's going to be the mood of the kids in school today, and who's going to hit me with what? Is it going to be hot soup today? Is it going to be hot chili? Is it going to be so greasy that it ruins the dress my grandmother made for me? I mean, how's this day going to go? Am I going to get that book that's a fire in front of me away from my chest before it catches my blouse on fire? It's a different thing. You start to think about, can I just make it the next hour? Can I just make it the next half hour? And then when I used to hear those helicopters overhead around just before 3 o'clock, it's time to go home. The helicopters are here to accompany me home. I've made it another day. Can I get from this desk to the hall to my locker and get out? And then, you get out and you get to the car and, some of the greatest times we used to have would be riding on the way home. And then we joke, we kind of play with each other. And you let your stomach would go back into its seat where it usually rests. And those would be nice times because we'd talk to each other about our day. And, I'd always make horrible, horrifying jokes about the whole thing. So that was kind of nice. But then again, we'd get probably usually to the head of the NAACP, Daisy Bates' house, usually would be. And we'd have to face press conference. So it would be grown up, watch what you say in the press conference. We could say one thing, by the way. One thing could be said in a press conference on one day, which would trigger hell the next day. One wrong comment, one wrong word could mean that the next day in the shower, I get bathed in scalding water. So, I was on guard. I wasn't, that was the end of my childhood. That was it, over and out. There were 6 girls and there were 3 boys among the Little Rock 9. We'd all known each other. The first year I went to school, I went with Terry Roberts. And so we'd all known each other very well. Minnie Jean Brown was, for all intents and purposes, a very good friend. We had known each other. We lived a block apart and we were buddies. We walked to school together. We talked, we visited, we ate meals together. Our parents knew each other. She was a big woman, tall, 5'8" about, and pensive, thoughtful, creative, very, very much a kind woman, a kind girl growing up, and fun. Minnie Jean was under a great amount of stress. Because we were big, because the both of us were big, we would usually be singled out for more attention. Minnie Jean Brown was also at the time a little bit fair-skinned with reddish hair and strong, a really, really strong spirit and feisty. And I could see day by day a little bit of her being chewed away at. She had, maybe it was because of the nature of her support system at home or just because she was tired. She got picked on, I think, maybe a little bit more than other people did. We all got picked on. But I could just see every day a little bit of her automatically telling herself, no, I can't hit back. No, I can't do this. And yet going further out on the edge, just like all of us were. And then there came the day that she was in that cafeteria and she just couldn't handle it anymore. And so she just gave up. And she knew I could just see her little head click. She consciously said to herself, no, Minnie Jean, if you do this, you know you won't be here. But then this was the time of the year when we all didn't want to be there. I wanted to be dead. I wanted to be away from there, however I got away from there. She found a way out. She found a way out. And I was so jealous. I went to her house afterwards and she got all these new clothes and she was packing them and she was going away. And I wanted to go with her, but I knew I couldn't. But Minnie Jean Brown was a neat human being, is a neat human being. And she gave her all. She gave her personal best. If she had stayed maybe beyond that point, she would have gone nuts. There was this huge cafeteria. And the cafeteria was always the time to get us. If you're going to get food splatter on you, you're going to get tripped. I mean, it was almost not worth having lunch because the cafeteria was fair game. Because it was a big place and you had to walk among these lines of people. You were always going to get heckled, called nigger. By then you didn't even hear it. Who cares? Just let me sit down and eat my food. And she was carrying this chili. And this guy went for her, tripped her, and worked on her. And she let go. That's it. I mean, she couldn't go. And I know how she felt. She couldn't go any farther. That was it. Better she should stop then than go farther and snap. By the time school had ended, I had sort of settled into myself. And I could have gone on for the next 5 years. It didn't matter anymore. I was past feeling. I was into just that kind of numb pain where you say, hey, I can make it, do whatever you like, and it just doesn't matter anymore. But I came home and by myself, I walked to the backyard and I burned my books. I burned everything that I could burn. And I just stood there crying, looking into the fire and wondering whether I would go back, but not wanting to go back. And realizing by then the magnitude of what I'd done, because, then I'd heard all these adults say, you've made these inroads for generations yet unborn. And, I realized that it was important to do that. And realizing also by this time the danger I'd first, and, it's just like everything hit me. I knew what I'd done, but if school had gone on one more day, I wouldn't have made it. At that point, I needed that break. And yet I knew that I had learned a lesson that would serve me all the rest of my life, because I knew then that nobody, not another human being certainly, could break me. Because I had learned the limits of Melba. I knew how far she could go then. And I knew that her strength depended on God and not on what somebody else did to her outside. And that was the best lesson I ever learned. When I burned the books, I was burning the pain, the terrible anguish, the terrible fear that I felt, this feeling that is still, to me, indescribable. The feeling of not being enough, of not being, what's wrong, the pain, the horrible pain that you can't get beyond, that you can only go through. The fear, the extraordinary fear that I felt, that I learned to live with this fear. It must be what it's like to be, in a prisoner of war camp. You've got to learn to live with the fear. And I learned to live with the fear. So the burning was saying, hey, I'm going to make it. It really doesn't matter. I will make it. I can get beyond all of what you do to me. And what you say to me doesn't make me. The Little Rock Nine are a unique group of people. And as I get older, I realize how unique we really were. Tell my mother she had a heart condition when she started. And all of us used to protect her. She had a very serious heart condition, and she went through this with a heart condition. The kind of heart condition where she had to sit down on her haunches at times, and she would change color, turn blue. And she paid a big price. She eventually had an operation. Elizabeth Eckford perhaps has paid the major price. Elizabeth Eckford has not since Little Rock had what we call a normal life. She paid a dear price. She gave her life. The normalcy of it. I'm sure wherever she's fine, but she's not been able to function. Um, I think we all learned something. I would be a different person had I not gone to Central High School. And when I talk now to everybody, I think we all would be different. Certainly, look at among us the success, the strength, the ability to cope with life, the ability to function in the real world was increased, enhanced by that. Because at an early age, we learned who we were. We learned, hey, you got to stretch. I think Carlotta Walls, for example, I just saw her a little while ago, still has a tremendous case of asthma. We still cry together. I've talked to Terry Roberts, Dr. Terry Roberts. Each of us has a thin thread running through us, a semblance of the pain we endured. I am sure that it has affected me in the sense of my fear of people, some of the choices I make, some of the things I do. I can be standing in line in a suburb of San Francisco waiting for a movie and look around me, and all of the people in that movie are waiting in line with me are white teenagers or white. And for just an instant, I'm frightened. And I tell myself, it's fine. So we all paid prices, but we all gained. Because I believe you're always where you're supposed to be to learn the lesson you need to learn. So, hey, Little Rock was a lesson, baby. That was a lesson that I can't forget, but a lesson that serves me. I learned from Little Rock to care more about people because I don't ever, ever, ever want to hurt anybody the way I was hurt. I learned strengths and weaknesses in people. I learned my own strengths and weaknesses. I learned that the color of racism is neither black nor white. It is an entity. The color of hatred is neither black nor white. Some of the people who were the kindest to me in my life have been white. The reason I live today is because of these people whose skin was white. It has to do with this horrible entity. It's a thing. It's an ugly, ugly thing. And you got to get past it, no matter where you see it, whether it's in the Holocaust in Germany or it's in Little Rock or it's in Vietnam. It's a thing that triggers people to mistreat other people and not to remember that we are all God's children and we are all human. And when that thing arises, each of us is responsible to do what we have to do to stop it. So Little Rock taught me to respect human life and to know that I cannot give it. So don't take it and don't abuse it, because I will not go ever into the space that anybody went with me. I will not do that to another human being. So it taught me to love.